Never let go. Never let go. Never let go.
So Never Let Go is horror's latest attempt at straying from everything that made traditional horror movies enjoyable and going right down that commentary elevated route, telling the tale of Halle Berry and her two sons living in the woods where they cannot leave the house. That's right, they are attached to the house by ropes. If they are touched by the evil beings without their ropes, they will be done. That's the premise of this movie. And I know you're probably thinking that sounds completely asinine. You're going to need to suspend your disbelief for this one. And boy, would you be right. So with that, you think you would get, something a little bit more traditional. You'd have some jump scares, you'd have some good setup pieces, and that is just not the case because this movie is painfully slow. That's the word, painfully slow. It is one of the hardest watches of the year. Takes its good old time building. It is more commentary than traditional scares. So be warned going into it. If you saw that trailer, you think you're going to get some jump scares, get something, put you on the edge of your seat. This is not that film. Because what this film is it's basically a carbon copy of the movie Frailty, stone for stone. And I've talked about that film a couple of times on this channel. I really enjoy it. But this film's doing the exact same thing where you have this very weird, deranged mother kind of telling these tales to her sons who have not really experienced the things for themselves. They're just believing their mother and the fact that they cannot leave this house. They're living in the woods, isolated. They're starving, miserable life. You would not wish it upon anybody what these people are going through. So you're kind of left wondering what to believe. Is the mom insane? Is she telling the truth? Is we going to get a reveal later on that everything she said is true? These kids just don't understand what to believe. So it should be mysterious, but really, as I said earlier on, it is just slow and boring. This is also another one of those horror films that requires you to have a ton of suspension of disbelief. Just the premise alone, the fact that you have these 5-mile cables of rope that you're leaving to go out in the woods with, you're exploring and scavenging day to day, living off of the supplies, feels very unlikely you'd even be able to hunt that much. And then you have the fact there's a dog in the mix, so you have a dog that's kind of going out. There's no real rules that apply to the dog. So there's just so much stuff that you'd have to immediately get over to even believe this concept could exist. So that's another one of the faults with this. It is very hard to get you immersed in the story because the setup basically makes no sense. Before I completely shit all over this film, there are a couple of redeeming qualities to this that I think are actually pretty good. The first one being the acting. Halle Berry, great to see her in another movie. Always been a fan of her work. I think she's good in this for what she's asked to do. Doesn't really have to do too much. It's basically the same thing over and over again, being a comforting mother. A little bit unhinged, but believable enough for what she's asked to do. Then you have her two sons, who I think are actually the best part of this film. The two kid actors, I think, completely steal the show in this, and they're actually the highlights of this. They're the leads of this for at least, I'd say, about half of the film of screen time. So I think they're both really good, and I'm kind of anxious to what their future careers will look like, because they are both incredible for child actors, especially in the ending of this. I think they both steal the show. They are by far the best highlight of this movie. But second to the acting in this, the only other thing I would actually say I enjoy and is done well is the cinematography and the way it looks. Kind of reminded me of what The Watchers could have been atmospherically. You find yourself in this very ran down forest shack with weeping willows and overgrown moss everywhere. It's just a very atmospheric forest, very dark, very foggy. I really loved the atmosphere of this thing, which is why it's so disappointing that there's really no suspense, no tension, anything that comes with it. Because I think when it comes to setting up set pieces, getting a story built where you could set it up, this is a perfect environment and atmosphere I love for movies. I just don't think they capitalized on it at all, and it has nothing scary or suspenseful to show for it. The biggest gripe I have with this film is for the majority of the runtime, all the way up until the final 20 minutes or so, it just plays out like the most boring possible version of a post-apocalyptic survival TV show or movie you have ever seen or could possibly imagine. Because how the movie's formatted goes something like this. You have this family with their ropes, they're going out scavenging for supplies. There's really no suspense or tension or scares or anything that I would evaluate to be anything over PG-13 level. So you're not really engaged. There's no jump scares. There's no tension to anything happening. You're just watching this family survive in the woods, just how it would sound. They're hunting, they're scavenging supplies. They're just doing every day-to-day task over and over again. And it just gets old really quick. So this thing drags painfully. As I said, I was in the theater alone. There was a couple of stints in this thing. Being the only guy in the theater, I checked my phone 15 to 20 times across a 20-minute period. As I said, felt like I was in this weird time riff where time was not moving. This is easily in the bottom 5 watchable films I've seen in theaters this year. This thing was like pulling teeth. It was so boring. The only possible terror to this film is psychological undertones. They're going for one of those 2024 horror angles. We have a very unsettling mom, some extreme household routines, some of the decisions this family has to make to survive, like how they hunt, possibly eating their dog at one point because of starvation, eating tree bark. That stuff is highly unsettling, but once again, that sounds like something for bear Bear Grylls, not a horror movie you mass marketed based on that trailer. It's nothing like that. This is just a survival tale, similar to The Last of Us, Walking Dead, just done way worse and a lot slower. I will say that one of the grand purposes of this film is to get the viewer to question what's real, what's not. You're supposed to be trying to put this puzzle together, figuring out who's telling the truth, who's not, what's the commentary about. And it is effective at that, but only because it's so purposely vague and so slow and so boring, almost to the point you stop thinking about it and you stop trying to figure it out. You're just waiting for any morsel of entertainment, but it ain't coming. I guess at the final 20 minutes, I will say it is okay. I didn't mind what they chose to do. Wasn't a huge fan, but it was levels above everything we got prior to that. So whether or not you really get any payoff of this movie is probably going to take until the final 20 minutes until you even know, because everything up until that point is just so generic, so run-of-the-mill, so repetitive. But if you really love that ending, maybe this movie makes sense to you. If they would have went for more of what they tried in the final 20 minutes, more traditional scares, going out alone at night, some scary visuals, trying to get you to jump, some tension, it could have been okay. But they just choose to neglect that all the way up until the final 20 minutes. So just not enough of it for me. The way they marketed this film, the way they advertised it, the premise alone, what you think it was going to be, it's none of that. So for that reason, I just think it is so forgettable. Overall, guys, I think this is one of the hardest watches I've had in theaters all year. I was the only one in the movie theater. I was bored stiff, okay? I don't normally think of walking out of a film. I didn't almost walk out of this one, but I know there's a part of me that regrets not doing so because I do not think the payoff was worth it at all. Incredibly slow, incredibly boring, very little payoff. It is well acted and looks good though, if that's something you're into. But yeah, this is one of the hardest watches of the year so far, probably in my bottom 5. This movie is absolute background noise. So have any of you guys seen or heard of this yet? Do you agree, disagree? Comment down below, let me know. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, join me down below. I'd love to talk movies with you, but that's all I got in this video. Peace!